Well, here we are. It's almost the end of March. We're supposed to be in spring. I don't know about you, where you are in that greater Ottawa area, what's going on. But here, despite the fact the sun is shining and it's not that chilly, we anticipate the storm of storms about to hit us. Don't ask me what that means. We've got weather warnings all over the place, and people are saying it's, tobogganing tomorrow. And I go, really? Jeez, you know, okay, there we are. Anticipation, anticipation.
It's one of those for up here. It's one of those where it's a 1 degree change can totally change the
Yeah,
frame or the type of what happens.
yeah,
What we're really concerned about here is nothing like the 1998, 1999 ice storm that happened.
right.
We're not at that apocalyptic level, but a significant enough accretion of freezing rain that
Yeah.
it will bring down certain power lines. Now, not the
Oh,
major towers,
no, no.
but we're talking about, you drop that at temperature, it rains 1 degree. You drop it 1 degree, you move it 1 degree difference, we get a snowstorm.
Yeah,
So it's a
yeah,
very, very finite range of meteorological conditions that will give us that. But that's the big worry here,
yeah.
um, is that we're going to have that kind of an event where it starts to take down the. And you're right, it's people are talking, even though we've still got a little bit of snow on the ground, very little bit of snow, but I've still got maybe a foot in the backyard at places, but I can see green patches emerging.
Yeah,
So we
yeah.
still have a bit of snow up here, but there are people talking about, when is the golf course open? There are people talking about getting winter tires off. So people are very much looking forward to the change in the season. We're
Yeah,
officially in spring now,
yeah,
right? We're
yeah.
we're we're across the equinox. We're in
Yes,
spring,
yeah,
and so people are looking forward to that. Unfortunately, the reality is everybody seems to forget to ask Mother Nature what she's up to.
yeah. She tends to have, and rightly so, a mind of her own.
Slightly ornery.
Okay, that's a perspective and an interpretation. I personally think
Yeah.
it's fine.
Also do I.
Yeah, but what's interesting is for me, the real sign of spring is not I'm looking out the window here at my office, the sunshine or the fact that it might go up to 10 or 11 degrees today and then jump down to, minus whatever tomorrow, or the storm or whatever. It's the songs, the bird songs in the morning. I'm very lucky. I'm surrounded by, I know I live in a condo. I'm on the third floor of a building, so basically an apartment. But my bedroom backs onto the back of the building and surrounded by trees. And so it's morning because you get the bird song. And that's where you go. That's such a nice way to wake up in the morning, is the sound of nature.
Unless, of course, I'll give you the counter to that. If you've ever had the opportunity to sleep a night at Royal Roads University campus in Sook, British Columbia, that's not the morning you bird song you hear because they have a local flock of peacocks on the
Yes,
campus.
yes, I know. I've been on campus.
Okay, so when you wake up at 5 in the morning to
Yep.
peacocks, it's not a beautiful song.
No, no, it isn't.
It's not something to stir and get you ready for a
Nope,
productive, wonderful day.
nope, nope.
No, you're looking for your shotgun, which of course you don't have at the university, but that's the first thing that comes to your mind.
Yes.
People share recipes about how to cook the birds. But yeah, no, I love the sound of nature in the morning.
Yeah.
And I often like to go to sleep at night to the sound of rainstorms.
Oh, yeah, so do I.
So I have one of those Google Home devices sitting next to the bed, and you can just yell out, "Hey Google, play thunderstorms."
Yeah,
And then you can adjust the level and it'll play a thunderstorm, rainstorm, running water, whatever it is. Nature sounds.
yeah, yeah,
I'm an outdoorsman. I love
yeah.
being in the midst of nature and camping next to a river or camping next to a waterfall and just listening to those sounds. So yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's better than just the whiskey jacks because they're around all year long.
Yes, they are.
Hardy birds.
Yes. What I find fascinating about that, the changes, because that's what it is. It's the recognition that we live in a world of cycles. We live in a world of change, none of which is managed as a process. It's just this is reality. It's the volatility of it all, the volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Here we are, we get a prediction from the Weather Service saying, storm warnings, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yes, be prepared. Not sure what that means at this time, whether it's going to last forever or whether it's just going to be a quick storm going through, whatever. What's fascinating about it all is that it's supposed to warn us so that we're prepared for, and now we're getting into this whole issue of preparedness. Well, I'm sitting here very comfortably, in my home office I'm surrounded by, I don't know, close to 1,000+ books. And even before we started, I actually started perusing the books on the shelf saying, oh, I wonder when I'm going to read that one, kind of thing. And I said, oh, I remember that one. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was written by, and my little tiny brain is working away. Yet Armageddon could happen in the next 10 minutes, you know? And I'm going, okay, do I have bread? No, I have to go out and buy bread. Do I have, to go this? Do I have this? Do I have this? What's my wine supply like? Oh, okay, fine, good. I'll survive it.
Well, it's just about how do you want to navigate the disruption? If it's
Yes.
wine and bread, then you're ready wine and bread.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because neither one needs electricity.
No, no, it just, yes, as a matter of fact, I could do it in the dark.
Exactly. Bread and red wine, and you're good to go. What else do you need? A little whiskey, maybe?
Oh, that's easy. I have so much of that stuff that I'm not worried about that.
But
It's just finding the right. It's when I get snooty about it. Do I have the proper glass for a single malt?
and was given a gift a couple of decades ago. The company has now gone bankrupt, but it was Nova Scotia Crystal, hand
Oh,
blown glasses.
yes, I know it. Yeah,
So I have two
yeah.
single malt glasses and a small water carafe,
Uh-huh.
hand blown from Nova Scotia Crystal.
Yeah.
That you're absolutely right. When I want to tell the world what I think of it, that's when I pull out um, the very fine crystal and pour my single malt into it. Yes.
When I don't want to tell the world what I actually think of it because I have to control myself, that's when I pour. So we're a little bit opposite on that.
Oh no, see, I that comes out and I light a nice Cuban cigar
Mm.
and then I sit back and I inform the world what it's doing wrong. Obviously,
I actually,
nobody's listening to me, but
no, oh,
I'm at
well,
my
no,
own
no, no.
podium.
Come on.
I'm at my own lectern. I'm
Yeah,
giving a personal lecture to the
yeah,
world as
yeah.
to how to fix its obvious problems that it's ignoring.
No.
Bit pretentious, maybe, but why not?
Well, I actually do more escapism, and this is where I take the ostrich in the sand, head in the sand approach, where I'll turn on something absolutely spectacular in terms of music, and I will have all the lights out, and I'll turn a candle on, whatever the hell that means. I think you have to light a match to do that. And then I'll have my single malt, and I'll sit there in the dark or quasi-dark or semi-dark or whatever it is, and just say, the hell with it. The world can F off at that point. I don't have to tell it anything because it has been telling me way too much.
Yeah.
None of it is either interesting or relevant or important, and I don't give a damn who you are. It's one of those, who cares? Now, when that becomes the standard approach to life, not just what you do with the single malt, now you get a different problem. All right, that's where your head is firmly in the sand, like an ostrich.
Well, it's also in the current environment we live in right now, where it's often a good idea, often a far better strategy to sit alone in your living room and tell the world what you think of it than to stand in front of a microphone, tell the
Oh, yeah,
world what you think of it.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
In
I know.
today's current culture and current set of events that are ongoing,
Yeah,
I have my speech and I feel much better about it.
yes,
Right? It's a
that's true.
very cathartic idea to sit there and just say, "Hey, this is what the world would look like if you let me control it."
What's interesting about that is often enough our issues are, if we want to be stoic about it, and you listen to Marcus Aurelius or you read Marcus Aurelius, he's a little dead to listen to. Um, you're convinced as a Stoic that it's all in your head anyway. And I go, well, actually, no, there's an awful lot of shizzy out there, and it's not in my head. It's just stuff that I have to deal with. And it's extricating yourself from reacting, but even more than that, for me, it's I extricate and I don't want to react. I just want to I want to ignore it. You will sit there and you will actually bump heads with it.
Yep.
However, both of us would avoid having the world bump back. I don't care what other people's opinions are. I am not interested if you like, whether you like what I'm saying or don't like what I'm saying. Couldn't give a flying hoot. Why? It's your opinion. And opinion is everything now.
It's so funny. This ties to I'm teaching a course right now, a graduate level course at Royal Roads in the disaster and emergency management program. And the teams they went out, they did some research, they gathered a bunch of data, and they're writing a report for the host city. I had that very conversation about what does what do we care about, your belief, your opinion, or what the data informs. And I told them bluntly that I don't care what your belief is. I don't care what your opinion is. What does the evidence tell us is going on? I said, that is your scientific process. That's your grounding as an academic or a scholar.
Yeah,
That if you, now I often offer my opinion, but I try my best to phrase it as this is my opinion.
yeah,
This is not what the evidence backs up.
that's
This
right.
is what I draw from it. So I
Yeah.
had that discussion. And as well, last night, I jumped on a call with a prospective student who's doing a thesis and wanted me to be his academic supervisor. And I basically said, my rules of the game are pretty simple. This is about the data, not about your opinion.
Mhm.
And if you can understand the difference between those and follow that roadmap, we'll work well together. But if you're starting your project with the idea of, I just need to tell them to do this and everything will be
Yeah,
solved,
yes,
then we won't work well together because you're not going to conduct an academic process. You're
right,
going to simply try to insert your beliefs at every step.
that's right.
So you're absolutely right. The world is full of people with opinions. And one
Yes,
of my favorite phrases when I was younger was, you have an opinion, but your opinion can be wrong.
yes.
And this would fire people up. They're like, but it's my
Oh, yeah.
opinion. It can never be
But
wrong. Oh,
yeah,
no.
can never be wrong. It's
Oh,
all,
no.
yeah,
Your opinion can be absolutely dead wrong.
totally, totally wrong.
Even no matter how much you hold on to it or how to your core
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
developed.
Yeah, interesting. I'm being an academic advisor to a group of students at Humber College, and they have their senior report or senior studies, senior project, whatever you want to call it. And one of them is I just received this morning and started reading and said, okay, I don't have enough time for this because their paper is 30 some odd pages long and it's actually incredibly well done. But when they gave me their draft on how they were going to approach, this is what we're going to do. I'm not all that gentle when I'm dealing with students. I never was. So in writing, I actually tore them to pieces. I said, excuse me, you have already decided what the solution is.
Exactly. Yeah.
You are presenting this paper. It's about urban logistics applied to the city of Toronto, gridlock, and so on and so forth, and what the causes are. And I just said, wait a minute, you've already decided what the causes are. Yeah, and quite frankly, the causes are the usual stuff that people whine about, including me, in terms of experience, right? I whine about the public transit, TTC. I whine about, gridlock and so on and so forth. Yeah, but that's whining. Whether you call it opinion or otherwise, that's just whining.
Yep.
I don't want to see that in a paper. I said, this paper is going to be presented to the city of Toronto and the Chamber of Commerce, right? And they're actually one of your backers, right? If you want to go and take a position, and wave a flag that is speaking to a what I would call a vested interest, right? Whether you call it left wing, right wing, up the middle, I don't give a damn what the spectrum is. But if you're just going to put a stake in the ground and say, this is the solution, I wouldn't get past page 5. And you'd be lucky if I got to page 5. I said, I would tear it to pieces. I would throw it out the window and tell you you're full of crap.
Yep.
And they just went, oh. I said, here's all of the issue. Here are all of the issues that you have raised. That I'm not saying your opinion is invalid or invalid or whatever, but I really don't care. If you're aiming at a solution, then you have to identify the root cause of the problem, right? And the root cause of the problem is not necessarily what the press says. You have to do a little more homework. And just reading the piece today, part of it, I just went, oh, you guys actually listened to what I was saying. I was kind of shocked.
You got it.
They got it,
Yeah.
because one of the things they said, and I didn't even say this, but I hinted at it, was the reason for the increased, let's say, gridlock problems, overcrowding, is consumerism, right? And it's e-commerce. And so if you identify that as a problem, or at least the root of a problem, then maybe you have also discovered the potential solution to that problem. All right. Don't talk about bad politics or politicians who don't know what they're doing, or political conflict or what. You're not going to solve that. The last time we talked, it was that distinction that you made, mostly you made, and I thank you for it, because I learned, I always say control is an illusion. Well, there are things you cannot control, but then there are things you can control. You can control what's going on between your two ears, and you can control what comes out of your mouth, damn it. And that's where we exercise responsibility in any way, shape, or form. So take your responsibility, telling this team, take your responsibility seriously, and talk about what you have discovered is the root cause. Give the analysis, use academic studies and the models that come out of other cities. Got to remember, Toronto, by many stretches of the imagination, is a tiny city compared to other parts of the world. All right, and see what they did in terms of what you would suggest about the problem, not about the political inertia.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
and you go, oh, and I think this group is going to present a very interesting, some very interesting insights to the powers that be, especially business interests. May not go anywhere, but that's a different issue.
Well, that's the idea of you're not solving the problem. you're finding what the evidence say is ideally the root cause or a contributory cause that may
Yeah,
not
yeah,
be, and it's what you found, not what you hope to find, not
yeah.
what you think to find. And just taking, I told the students that, when you're asking questions to business leaders about their study was grounded in the business's role in post-disaster recovery operations.
Mhm.
What did the business see as the city's responsibility?
Yeah,
Was there any coordination?
yeah.
Would they want to be involved in the building of a collaborative network or a collaborative system of helping businesses recover post event? If you own a business in Toronto and it's a significant disruption and you have to recover like the pandemic,
Hmm.
other than the obvious give me money, which we
Hmm.
set aside,
Hmm.
what structurally would you like the city to be capable of doing, and where would you see the city providing the most value?
Yeah, yeah,
And then my persuasion on them is just believe them when they tell you.
yeah, yeah,
Like, believe your data when it tells you that something like consumerism is likely a big contributor when you might not have thought that.
yep,
And maybe it's something else in my students' study that you wouldn't normally think of. Everybody wants more money, and I set that aside. I don't care. Everybody wants more money. Give me
yeah,
more money,
yeah,
whatever the
yeah,
program is.
yeah,
And take the data and believe it
yeah,
and
yeah,
present it. And then you have a problem, and then you can offer potential solutions. But when you're offering potential solutions, they're either, like you said, reflective of what another jurisdiction might have
yeah,
utilized, or they very well could be what you think, based upon our knowledge, would be a good strategy to
yeah,
consider.
yeah,
But the grounding of it is what the evidence tells you, because a lot of times, and I find students go in with it, like you said, with a very set of beliefs. We have to go in
yeah,
and tell them this.
yep, yep,
So we need to design a study that tells us this. And I know there are some in academia that still do that to the day.
yeah,
You know, like, if you want a peer reviewed piece of literature that backs up your position, you shall find it,
yes,
right?
yes, I
You
know,
shall find it.
I know.
Now the quality of that's a whole different podcast, I
Oh,
think.
no, no, that's,
But
let's not
it,
go down there.
it's understanding that trying to tell them that the answers you're seeking are there. You
Yeah.
just have to pose the questions and
Well,
believe the answers that you receive.
yeah. Well, it gets to the dynamics of information, which is one of my new favorite topics, which is a favorite topic because I don't necessarily understand it entirely. That's what makes it interesting. If I understood it entirely, then I'd say, oh, okay, fine. Then I might as well go with my library and look at a book that I haven't read yet and, take it down and read it. And then say, oh, I never thought of that. It's not that the evidence needs to solve the problem. The evidence needs to get you to think. And information is a thinking modality. It's not a solution modality. It's giving you something to think about in terms of your decision on what might or might not be viable. Now, look at all the ways in which I've just disowned ownership of everything I just said. It's the might or might not, because it is that complex. For example, so we say consumerism is at the root of increased trucking to the point of polluting the universe. Okay, there's a viable association between all that, and so, but there's no solution. What are you going to do? Get people to stop buying?
Yeah.
It's not going to happen. I mean, that's not a solution. The solution is, what are our go around plans and strategies in order to handle the increase in home delivery? You're not going to stop home delivery. It's
No.
just not that's if
No.
that's the road you're taking, you've missed the point, right? You've identified it as a contributing factor, possibly even a root cause of all these other issues that you've identified, or problems or considerations. Having said that, you have to recognize that the root cause isn't something you're going to solve. The root cause is something you have to handle. There's a huge difference between solving and working with
Yeah. Oh,
something,
huge. Yeah.
right? The gap between those two approaches is massive, and people don't understand that. Oh, well, we have to do this because it's going to solve that. No, there are no solutions. All right, there are go around plans. There are go around possibilities. There are capabilities. You know, we started our conversation before we started recording this by talking about recovery, you know, and mitigation. You know, it's one thing to plan preparedness, you know, about how we handle exogenous or ordinary risk, if I could use such a term, ordinary risk situations, because we're all facing risk at all kinds of, and it's, you start by trying to understand risk. You know, there are financial risks, there are, you know, fundamental, food risks, you know, food security risks. You name it. There isn't anything that doesn't have risk associated with it. And that's part of the preparedness, is to recognize the multidimensional factors that go into what constitutes risk. You know, a tornado coming through your neighborhood, that's pretty obvious. A prediction on a weather alert that may or may not happen can either be ignored or be considered. If you consider it and you don't have milk, then maybe you have that 15-minute window of opportunity to go buy damn milk, right? Or you just don't have any milk,
Yeah.
right? Because the next day or two, who knows, you may not be able to leave the house.
Yeah. And you look at risk, and is the risk the tornado, or is the risk losing your house?
Ah,
Right. It's about how you frame. And we
yeah.
often do this when we speak to preparedness at the local level, because when I try to, people are a bit evasive of avoidance when you start listing off all the threats they're exposed to.
Mhm.
Well, you got to be, earthquake is a risk, a hurricane is a risk, an ice storm is a risk. But when you phrase it in, because if I say and we get tornadoes in Ottawa, so
Yeah, I know.
real world thing, I face a tornado risk. What can Jeff do about a tornado risk?
Yep,
Probably little to nothing.
yep,
But what can Jeff do to be ready to lose his house?
yes,
If I face on losing, the risk is losing my accommodation, then it doesn't matter if it's a down hydro wire that burns it up, whether it's a gas fire, whether
yeah,
it's my neighbor burning both of our townhouses down because of something, or whether it's a tornado. If I focus on a risk that is within my control, I can be ready to lose my house.
yep.
I can have a strategy for what I do in the event, save lives type of thing. But
Mhm.
more importantly, and I absolutely believe it's more importantly, what does my recovery look like when I lose my house? And
Yeah,
if we can frame risk in what people can actually do, they
yes,
feel empowered to deal with a risk they're exposed to. Vice about telling people, oh, you're in a floodplain.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
What do you want me to do
exactly.
when the water's rising 2 feet a minute?
Yeah,
Like, what do you want me to do? Like, I can't do anything with floodwater. I can't do anything with earthquakes, and I can't do anything with tornadoes.
yeah,
I have one of those massive Hydro One energy towers running in my backyard, right? So right outside my backyard is like a 50-foot tower with
oh yeah,
10,000 megawatt
yeah,
lines
I know what
going
they
through.
are.
Right? So that sucker comes down. There's
Oh,
nothing I do about that.
nothing.
I can't build a set of structures around my house to
No,
deflect the
no,
wire when
no,
it comes
no,
down, right?
no, no.
So when you start having the conversation of putting people, even in the basic Stoic philosophy, of out of the things you can't control into the things you can control, and simply say you're exposed to 14 hazards, but there's really only two things you can do. So let's plan for those two things. And this is within your control. It speaks to a lot. And to solve the problem, we deal with this a lot when it comes to social issues. When you look at, employment insurance exists to address unemployment.
Right.
We don't solve unemployment.
No.
Unemployment is a structural reality of a
Right.
functioning economy.
Right.
Homelessness, same thing.
Yeah.
It is a structural event or a structural presence in all societies. You address it. You have systems to deal with it. They
Yeah.
improve, they get better, they learn, they evolve. But we don't solve the problem of unemployment or homelessness or poverty, etc. You address it. And I think if we understand that, then people, okay, we build on what we already know.
One of the things around preparedness that I have to think a lot about and trying to get people to understand is even more challenging. Never mind my thinking about it. Is it's not about how to avoid it's not about how to avoid the situation, the risk situation. It's there, whatever it is, it's there. It's how do we recover from it? Everything from, many organizations like ours, including fairly well-established universities, and I get these adverts on Instagram from MIT and Harvard all the time, where now they're giving programs away. Well, okay, we're in an era of chaos and uncertainty. So there's the risk right there, because we don't know what's going to happen, the next 10 minutes, what kind of a pronouncement is going to be made by so-called leaders of the so-called free world, and what that's going to do to make our lives either better or worse. All right, there it is. There's the uncontrollable side. Can we prepare for that unknown? Yes, we can. Obviously, there are things we can do. But there's also what do you do when when the shizzy actually hits the fizzy? All right. One of the first things you've got to realize, and anybody who's had children know this, you got to deal with the shizzy. It's there. You can't ignore it. Try that with a toddler still in diapers. No, you have to deal with it. And so, if that tower, that hydro tower behind you decides to take a leap, all right, you cannot do anything to prevent it from taking that leap. So preparedness is not about prevention. They're not the same thing. It's what do I do if, right? Now, first thing is you have to recognize that given the height of that, and given where my house is, and given the positioning, okay, this is simple geography, there it is, it's there, I'm here, house is that tall, this is that tall, and the likelihood, without being an engineer, the likelihood of it going this way, which is where my house is a possibility. The likelihood of it going the other way is also a possibility. Depends on the winds and which way the winds blow, none of which we can predict up to a point. So the preparedness is not about the tower. It's what do I do if the tower hits my house? Where do I go? What can I do to survive in the short term, then the longer term? How do I make sure we are all safe? And so all the other things that go with it. And it's thinking in terms of, so what if there is an economic downturn and all of a sudden the borders are closed and all of a sudden there's like a $250,000 tariff on absolutely everything going both ways. I know that's a bit of an exaggeration, but it isn't that much of a bit of an exaggeration. And, suddenly everybody is scrambling and running, and rightly so, because we are at that stage of quasi panic. But there are going to be long-term effects of all this. How do we handle the long term? The short term, okay, sometimes you just have to bite the damn bullet, and try to figure out how to get out of there. But you have to recognize that once it's all non-chaotic, to put it into a non-term, once it's all non-chaotic, guess what? It ain't going to go away. COVID, life after COVID was radically different.
Yeah.
Period. And if you didn't catch that, then I don't know where the hell you are to begin with.
And look at how many people when COVID hit in March of 2020, and rightfully so, because nobody had seen this before, sat on their couches and waited for somebody to fix it and put it back to normalcy.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it became apparent that 2 weeks to flatten the curve was going to be around a little bit longer than April of 2020.
Yeah.
Many people still sat on their couch
Yep.
and still waited for some magical force to intervene
Yeah.
and turn it back to what they wanted and understood normalcy to be, and
Yep.
didn't see it for the transformational event that it was.
Mhm.
And there are a group of people who had pivotal strategies, who understood that a disruption was possible. No, they probably didn't know ahead of time that a pandemic was coming,
Mhm.
but they were positioned for this. And there are companies that did exceptionally well. There are products that did exceptionally well.
Yep.
There are entrepreneurs who did exceptionally well, not because they had a bunch of money stuffed away, but because they looked into the lens and realized this might be structurally different. And what
Exactly.
would the world look like coming out
Yep.
the other end?
Right.
And I have to admit, it's like people today who are sitting around their business tables thinking of whether it's appropriate for them to develop tariff related strategies. You're done. Like you should have done that in November of last
Yeah.
year, let alone now.
Yeah.
But this is about, and when we equate that from the business perspective and put it into the family perspective, we simply try to bridge that gap, if you will, to say there are a lot of things that can happen to you as a family that are beyond your control, that are going to affect how you run your life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Nobody's asking you whether you like it or not. In fact, nobody cares.
Yeah.
What are you going, what, and this is why when I talk about what I write about is your trifecta of preparedness plans, I talk about the third one being you're fired.
Yeah.
What is your plan as the primary income earner for your family when you're fired tomorrow? And there were great people doing wonderful work at healthy companies that were fired in the pandemic. They did
Yeah.
nothing wrong.
Yep.
The company just shut down and put everybody on EI.
Yeah.
What is your plan right now? How do you intend to earn an income when the current income, the way you do it, just goes away?
Yeah.
And that doesn't cost any money. It's a bit of effort and time investment, but what it does is it takes down that anxiety and stress level. Nobody wants to get fired,
No.
but everybody will at one point or another.
Sure.
You're leaving the current job you're in at one point or another.
Yeah.
So if you bring down that stress level and that anxiety level, knowing you have a strategy that you think is going to work, whether you're a business, whether you're an individual, whether it's a pandemic, a tornado, a hurricane, an earthquake, you just realize that when I get upended due to things beyond my control, I've at least thought through what I'm likely going to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now you're well ahead of the rest of the population. You get fired. And my brother used to work in downtown Toronto, lived in Mississauga, did that commute every day, walked into his building one day and was met by security and HR.
Yeah.
There you are.
That's
And
it.
so and he gave me this phrase. He said he went home, he did what he needed to do, didn't sign anything, took everything, took his little banker's box of personal items they had collected for him. And went home. He said, I had my 24-hour pity party.
Mhm.
And then I got up the next day and got after it.
Yeah.
And he knew what he would turn to next, and he did.
Yeah.
And so that brought down the stress in his life, knowing that if I get fired, which I'll argue with you is just as impactful as you losing your condo,
Yep.
you've got a strategy. And this is why there's not a lot of things to think about. But like you said, I can't prevent these things from happening. And I fight a lot online about the use of the word prevention in preparedness, because you can't. You
No.
can mitigate, because
Yes.
prevention is a binary. You either prevent it or you don't. You can't
Yeah.
partially prevent something,
Yeah. Yeah.
but you can mitigate something.
Yeah.
So a prepared individual gets hit with the same event everybody else does, but the impact is lesser
Yeah.
to a lesser degree. And their time to bounce back is far shorter than everybody else's.
Yes. It's the recovery.
It's the recovery that is
Yes.
quicker and
Yes.
better planned than
Yes.
other people. They don't get a pass, they still get affected,
Yeah.
but their ability to bounce back in a
Yeah.
scientific way back to what normalcy used to look like
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
quicker.
You know, if you look at it from a mega business point of view, and I always like to point to this company because they were always touted as the best organized company, and how disorganized they were in very fundamental ways. Not disorganized in panic mode, screaming and yelling and throwing things. Um, that's the easy part of panic. It's when you discover that everything you've done up to the point of the exogenous event actually was wrong. That's when you go, oh, our entire strategy is questionable. And it's Toyota, you know. So you have your a major production plant in some godforsaken part of Japan disappears because of a tsunami. Boom, gone. So knowing full well that you have plants all over wherever, you can replace, quote unquote, or at least move the production to other plants, which they did. So you say, oh, great, great, great policy, great strategy. And so you don't want to shut down production because it's too expensive if you can't get the parts and can't make the cars. So you have to meet your production quotas. That's the whole point. Now, two things were discovered as a result of this change, because everything was put in place. They had their mitigation plan, just relocate to point X or point Y or location X, location Y. We can cover it, right? Two problems immediately, because the great, what shall I say, strategy or process management that came out of Japanese total quality management approach to things was, of course, Lean and Six Sigma. Well, first thing they learned is that, guess what? Bad strategy. Why? No inventory. Not enough. Right? Why? Because that's the whole thing. Inventory is a sin in a lean strategy. You can't have inventory. And so immediately, that's the first thing they learned, that everything they depended on in order to be successful in terms of controlling costs in the process, production process, was wrong. Okay. And you go, whoa. And it took a tsunami for them to realize it. If it weren't for the tsunami, everything would have been, oh, this is the way we do things, ta-da, ta-da, ta-da. Because Chicken Little isn't running around saying the sky is falling, because the sky doesn't fall, because we're all, engineer oriented and we are controlling the process. This is the way it is, because engineers work out of that kind of mindset. It's perfect so long as, it's still, the lights are still on. It's when the lights don't come on that you have a problem. But the second thing, and this just like I was just stunned. The second thing they realized is that they didn't maintain the same quality standards throughout their entire system. And so what happened? Well, automobiles that were now being assembled in another country did not follow the same quality standards that were in the original location. And you go, whoa, whoa, wait a minute. What does that mean? Aren't you people built around a total quality management structure? And the answer is yes, except. And you go, whoa. So now you recognize, you discovered that the locations each have their own approach to what constitutes quality. Now you're dealing with the human factor, not the process factor. And you go, guess what you learned? You learned that preparedness isn't about preventing something from happening, but it's about how do we recover when the shizzy hits the fizzy. Your sound is off.
Navigating through is not all that difficult for most organizations because they're pretty good at, in the 1 or 2 days that are the actual event itself to navigate through it. But you're right. It's recovery is in the emergency management community. Recovery is the ugly cousin that is in the corner at the family events that nobody really wants to talk to.
Yes.
Right? Because
Oh yeah.
CNN is there for the hits in the recovery.
Oh yeah.
Anderson
Oh,
Cooper
totally.
needs to stand in a ditch to
Oh yeah.
waist deep to
Yep.
show how much the flooding is, right? I
Yep.
mean, that's great. Everybody's there. Recovery is
Yep.
a multi-year process in a lot of communities. When you talk about, I was in Jasper in February. I've been to a presentation from the Director of Protective Services in Jasper, and they're going to be a couple of years to recover.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But nobody's there now. There's no TV hits there. There's no, Globe and Mail stories about because we've moved on to the next cool recovery
Yeah.
response. Because response is your lights and your sirens and your hits, and
Yep.
everybody's all about it. But the recovery is the one that's the hard, the drawn out, the one that is most, I would argue, the most misunderstood.
Yeah.
And my students right now in the graduate program are working in the recovery space.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got a host city in Ontario, and they wanted help with their recovery plan because they've done everything else fairly well, and they're at the leading edge of policy development up until recovery.
Yes.
They literally have nothing.
Yes.
And so they asked the students to do some research in different areas and present them options as to how to think about that. The difficulty is recovery is something that takes 2 years, and we'll just figure it out. That's the general attitude. And trying to say to somebody, well, actually, like the Toyota issue, like the Canadian Tire distribution center in Toronto, and many other things that tell us that when you lean forward into what does recovery look like for my company, and companies are learning that a lot now in the cyberspace.
Mm-hmm.
A cyber attack is not a response only operation.
Mm-hmm.
How does your company recover
Yep.
when every piece of data it had is gone? Like
Yep.
gone.
Yep. Yep.
Have you thought that through? What does that look like? And no, getting another backup is not the answer,
No.
right? That's the recovery. So if you think through how do we recover from the various different potential threats, what does that look like? You're just getting a bunch of really smart people together to talk about different ways of working through things. And it's and I think it's MacArthur that often, or MacArthur or Patton that said, plans are useless, but the art of planning is priceless.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the idea of the job in recovery is to train a group of people that you trust
Yeah.
to operate together and who trust each other to make important decisions, less having 14 different plans in binders sitting on the back deck, which is, don't get me wrong, I'm a consultant. I'm happy. Pay me, I'll write you the binder, but I know how useless it is, right? Absolutely. Make a comment at it. But I know how the point is that recovery it gets back to one of the early points that I make in the entire process. It's about responsibility.
Yes.
Who's responsible for ensuring you are able to recover
Yep.
from
Yep.
something that is beyond your control?
And you introduce probably one of the most important words in this entire discussion, and that's the word who.
Yeah.
Because surviving an exogenous event, which is so fancy when I compare it to when the shizzy hits the fizzy, but that's what it is one thing. It's survival at that point. How do we get out of here so that we're not, killed by the tree or the hydro tower that's going to, come down on us? But the other side is that when we're talking about responsibility, we're talking about people. And so where is the people side of mitigation and recovery? We could talk about processes, we could talk about strategies, we could talk about policies, we could talk about procedures. As Jim Collins said, you have to have the right people with the right skills driving the bus.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's people. It's so before I got
Okay. Sorry.
yeah, no worries. But you were saying about the power of the people and to say, who's responsible for my outcomes. It's one thing to say I'm responsible to help the company navigate, but that's not a singular.
No, it's a people.
It's people.
That's a collective.
And it's about saying to people, hey, listen, we live in 2025. We live in a pretty chaotic environment right now.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Uh, which is no different than chaotic environments that it before. This is just a little bit more in our face, but we have to be ready to navigate things for which we cannot forecast.
Yeah.
And the idea of empowering people, trusting people, and training people
Yeah.
is that some of the events that are going to occur, and I'm going to use a horrible word, are unforecastable, right? Wonderful English bastardization. But the whole point is that even with the great minds, there are things that can occur that none of us saw coming.
Right.
And it's about empowering people to navigate through a chaos as it's presented.
Yep.
And to then recover the organization post event as it's presented.
Yes.
And this is why when I talk about tornado and earthquake and everything, when I talk about families, I just want the family to be ready for you. You have a binary choice. You can either stay in your house or you have to leave your house.
Yeah.
What do both of those look like?
Yeah.
Then after that, it doesn't really matter why.
Yeah.
And in professional sense, they call it the difference between disaster risk reduction, is what the UN talks about,
right,
to disaster impact reduction, which is what we talk about at the finite level of smaller units like individuals and families. I don't care why I have to evacuate.
Yes.
I just have to evacuate.
Yes.
So what does evacuation look like for me?
Yeah. Yeah. But maybe to bring this to some kind of I'm not going to say consensus because you and I would never agree on anything, but
what's the point?
That's the whole point. We part of the challenge, emerges when we start talking about social capital. All right. We live in society, but do we actually live in society and or in a social context? Let's
Co-located.
we locate, co-locate or otherwise, we locate, and that's it. And so it becomes one of those much grander, larger strategic issues, if you will, around commitment. Responsibility is one thing. This responsibility is how am I going to act in this particular situation? Commitment is I'm prepared to, and I'm going to connect with. not because someone's going to come and rescue me, but because I am responsible for myself and others
Yep.
inside of my social capital circle, whether it's colleagues or family or neighbors, or I don't care how you define it. It's a case of recognizing that we are not simply islands unto ourselves, to, quote or ruin John Donne's poem. And I think it's something for us to really sink our teeth in. So to bring this to an end, I have one of these great, silly signs that we see on occasion, and one of them says something like this, and I'm going to expand it. Idolizing a politician or a process or a strategy or a procedure is like believing the stripper really likes you.
And you have a future.